we're going to use the rest of the time today answering some of the questions that you've put into the system over the last 2 sessions or 2 parts of the conference, and direct those questions at Andrew and Sue. Andrew, I've got one to start with for you. You talked in your session about fast-tracking experience for people to become registered. Do you mean that people will not have to do the prescribed number of years of experience? There seems to be a bit of concern with the use of that term fast-track. Could you clarify?
Yeah, no, that's not the intent. So the normal registration process would apply. It's really fast-tracking the experience that is gained. So the feedback I get is that lots of building surveyors are graduating and then taking a number of years in excess of the minimum under the legislation to actually get their registration, that they struggle to fulfil the requirements for registration and the experience. So it's really tailoring these programs to identify all the registration criteria and meet those criteria as best we can during the course of the career pathway program, and then identifying for those that are already out there pathways that they can actually obtain that additional experience that they might need to achieve registration. So it's fast-tracking their career, hopefully getting them to the point of registration a lot quicker than what they would have normally if they were left to their own devices and not given a broader range of experience and opportunities.
Andrew. Sue, there's been a question come through, and this is one of interest to me. I mean, as we know, when a building surveyor issues a building order, if it's not complied with, the referral comes back into the BBA, and there's been talk on and off over the years about how well that works and how well supported private building surveyors are when the referrals come in. Have you got any information for the audience on how many building orders have been actioned, or how that process of referral is followed through by the BBA?
Yeah, thanks, Bronwyn, for the question. So I can advise that in 1920 we received 18 building order referrals from surveyors, and 51 of those proceeded to enforcement consideration. So far this financial year we received 68 building orders for enforcement, and 37 have been assessed as being enforceable, with 14 of those having been resolved through warnings issued to the property owner, and 23 are now being subject to that investigation assessment. So in terms of enforceability and those trends, that's roughly a rate of 60%. Generally speaking, as we've said before, when orders are deemed to be unenforceable, it's because the order doesn't specify the actual work that needs to be performed to address the non-compliance. The order doesn't match the matter which are outlined in the preceding building notice, or that incorrect legislation is referenced in the instrument. So to help that, we have launched a new enforcement templates. They are on our website. We've also conducted training, and I understand that on the 20th of January, all building surveyors were emailed our YouTube education series. It's had 337 views to date. So if you get on the VBA's website, you go to the bottom, click on the YouTube icon, and it'll take you straight to that VBA YouTube page. And just by the way, it also has a whole lot of other education material there. So I'd really encourage you to have a look at where that content is stored as well. I think, Bronwyn, there was also a comment around our posture, what was this implying about the VBA's posture? Well, I would like to say that, we have a very strong enforcement posture overall, and we've demonstrated that through the action that we've taken. And to take a quote from Professor Shergold this morning, who said sunlight is the best disinfectant, I would refer people to the VBA's 1920 annual report. Appendix 3, for clarity, page 133, where we published for the first time all of the enforcement activity we've taken across the building and plumbing industries over that 12-month period. And this transparency is about holding us to account, but also practitioners to account as well. And I think there were some comments about a specific case. I just welcome the opportunity to talk to the affected practitioner, and you can reach out to me, come and meet you, or alternatively encourage you to raise a complaint about the experience through our new integrity line.
Thanks, Sue. Andrew, one for you. We had a question, actually, this came through before the conference. Can building surveyors require evidence of suitability in the form of a certificate or a report from an access consultant in relation to compliance with the design for access requirements?
No, thanks, Bronwyn. So yes, you can accept that certificate of compliance, but it wouldn't meet the requirements under the Section 238 requirements, as they're not a prescribed practitioner. So they're not allowed to actually rely on it. They still have to have it form the opinion and provide that independent review. And if it's outside their capability to do so, they should be seeking some independent expert input to determine that the proposal is appropriate, that it meets the evidence of suitability.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. Sue, just on the integrity line that you announced yesterday, we've had a question that says complaints towards the BBA being handled directly. From what I can see, it's the opposite. A third-party hotline is being employed to handle the complaints. Could you please clarify? But also, to that end, would you suggest that private building surveyors do the same? And I assume that means also have a hotline for complaints.
Thanks, Bronwyn. So look, I would absolutely like to clarify these are complaints to the VBA. What Stopline does is it enables that complaint to be made at arm's length and with the option of doing so anonymously. And I've taken advice from integrity experts that said this was the best way to establish the line. So as a dedicated provider, they can provide that high degree of responsiveness and every call is answered by an experienced complaint handler. But following receipt, Stopline transfers that complaint to the VBA, and it's the VBA integrity team. Its role is to manage that, and Stopline has no further role in the process. Stopline's also the provider that we've provided for our own staff, so we established a Safe to Speak internal integrity initiative as well. And I want to be really clear that as CEO, I'm championing this initiative to drive a unified culture at the VBA, and I'm regularly engaging with the integrity team to learn the feedback about what's been received so we can adjust and learn as appropriately. In terms of building surveyors, look, it's a matter for them. The code of conduct sets out very clear expectations. I appreciate that every building surveying firm doesn't have some of the resources that we have, doing the best they can, as I would encourage everyone. Integrity in the system, it does help us restore confidence by consumers in what we do.
Thanks, Sue. Back to you, Andrew, playing a bit of tennis here. There's been a question about whether there's been an audit, and this goes to the issue that Sarah raised on the panel earlier. What sort of audit or review is there into the knowledge that graduates are getting from the qualifications that are prescribed for the building surveyor registration? And is there some work around that the VBA can comment on?
Yeah, so the VBA is doing a pilot study currently in regards to education, looking closely at building surveying qualifications and working with relevant membership organisations as well. And that's really looking at what are appropriate criteria for qualifications in building surveying. I acknowledge that a lot of the courses are probably driven commercially now around being able to have a generic type course that they can use the base for multiple other practitioners and then sort of tack on modules, if you like, to address the specifics of individual practitioners. In itself, that's probably not an issue as long as they do cover the core requirements of the profession, and we're getting graduates that are well enough equipped to be able to undertake their duties when they're commencing their careers. I think, from a registration perspective, probably the rigour that the VBA goes through around examining and other stepping stones to achieve registration are potentially, to a concern around some of that lack of education up front. So I think it's definitely something we're aware of and looking at and trying to inform future decisions around whether the current legislation set up with 2 prescribed courses is appropriate, or you know, the need for certainty around that registration process for students who are studying in other institutions.
Mm-hmm. Thanks. And back to you for this one, Sue, which has only just come in whilst Paul was asking questions. Is there a reason the VBA Tech Department has gone away from being reachable by phone? It seems like the only way a PBA can contact the VBA is by email, and it takes 3 to 6 weeks to get a response. It feels like the VBA has distanced itself from PBSs and the information source. Sometimes we need to be able to pick up the phone.
Oh, absolutely. Phone is really important, and thanks for the question. I mean, Andrew's now overseeing the tech and reg team, so he might have more to add to the conversation. In terms of a move to email, that came about from the transition to remote working. I'm not actually across today in terms of exactly what's been turned back on and turned off there in order to deal with some of that technology issue and transition to remote working. So I experienced conversations being had with practitioners, but in terms of that accessibility and the ability to get support, are we committed to that? You know, absolutely. And those are areas of focus of improvement. We made an organisational change earlier this year on the 1st of February to put our inspection and tech and reg services under the State Building Surveyor to give them the best possible technical leadership and that connection into industry. So Andrew, I'm not sure if there was anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, I'd be surprised and concerned if that was the case. It may occur for some of the more complex problems where there's you know, some process to go through in regards to making a decision, but yeah, 2 or 3 weeks is not acceptable. I think I've only sort of picked up the tech and reg team as of the beginning of this month, so it's sort of something I'll need to get into in more detail and have a look at. I think you know, from my perspective, we do need to get better at how we deal with technical inquiries internally and externally. I think part of that too is also being clear on what our role is as well. So providing some clarity that there's things that we can assist with and there's things that we can't, that we don't want to become a de facto permit approval process. So the risk is that we're getting asked standard questions that should be able to be done by the practitioner themselves. It's really looking at the regulatory matters that and the interpretation matters, and you know, probably engaging more broadly with industry where there are serious education needs that need to be addressed to pick up those other queries.
And Bronwyn, happy to take it as a question on notice and make sure that we provide a considered response to their question as part of our next communication out to industry for clarity as well.
Thanks, Sue. I now want to shift us towards ESMs because there's been more than one question about that. There's one question here about the extent to which electrical issues that are identified during inspections are referred to Energy Safe Victoria. And there's also then a second set of questions around increased policing of ESM maintenance issues, and there seems to be a distinct lack of knowledge by building owners about their obligations and a distinct lack of policing around ESM maintenance. And if either of you or both of you could talk about the work that's being done around ESMs and the specific question around perhaps electrical safety issues in relation to ESMs.
Yeah, so I can go first. So, yeah, where an inspector actually comes across an issue of non-compliant electrical work, our expectation would be that they'd refer it to Energy Safe Victoria. I think from a proactive inspections perspective, that'd tend to be fairly rare. And you know, our inspectors probably don't necessarily have the expertise in that space, and they'd be more likely to sort of pick up non-compliant gas installations that they then refer to ESV. In the ESM space, it's an area that we do limited inspections currently. That, as Sue mentioned, we're looking at doing a bit of an evidence-based inspection blitz, sort of 50 sites over the coming months. So it'd be interesting to see what that finds. Our cladding inspection guys are probably the ones that would be involved in that most. And once again, if there was evidence of really poor practitioner behaviour that's outside our remit, and the expectation would be that we would refer it to the appropriate regulatory authority.
Sue, did you want to add to that? Because there is a big program around ESM.
Look, it has been, particularly through the statewide cladding audit, and when we're inspecting properties for combustible cladding, we're generally also finding poor or substandard ESM maintenance. So there's been a lot of work done in terms of guidance material for owners, corporations. Obviously, a lot of the notices that go out and orders relate actually to those ESM measures that are so important for occupant safety. The piece I talked about before about making sure we've got registered practitioners for the scopes of work, and that transitioning the unregistered cohort into our regulatory remit so we can oversee them. And as part of that program, we'll also be spending more time on actually inspecting some of that work as well. So we're coming at it from many angles, education, information. Andrew, I think you ran an ESM webinar, was it earlier this year maybe? Had really broad attendance, which is really pleasing. So there's also seems to be an appetite to learn more about it, and there's a lot of information on our website as well. But it is a cultural shift that we need to really drive here.
And of course, ESM maintenance responsibilities also rest with local government. Andrew, did you have any insights into the extent to which local government's doing enforcement in this area and how you might work with them?
Yeah, so I think the question around who should audit ESMs and how we should go about regulating that space better is definitely part of the enhancement program that we're looking at the moment. And I think a survey that was conducted of through VMBSG of MBS delegates was a bit surprising in the ESM space, that I think there was only 40% of councils that indicated that they'd done any ESM audit inspections. So it is an area that I think there needs to be more focus. So there needs to be a better process. So even things like the annual reports, there's no mandatory requirement for the owners to lodge those at all. So hopefully with the further development in BAMs and the appropriate legislation, we can make that mandatory, that at least it's an annual sign-off, and there's some process around checking that that's actually occurring. Then there's the next steps to make sure that they're not just signing it off, and that the appropriate maintenance is happening to the appropriate standards. So there's lots of wheels in motion here to actually go through and end up with the final solution with well-performing ESMs. I think it's a matter of identifying all those issues, identifying the solutions, and then trying to prioritise how we implement those changes. That they're not all going to happen at once, but it's hopefully we can have a gradual process to improve it. So definitely an area that I think and in South Australia, it is a council requirement that they actually have building fire safety committees as part of council that have to review their building stock within their council area and risk manage inspections for ESMs and general safety of those buildings. So they would concentrate on high risk commercial buildings, accommodation buildings, and those sort of things. But it provided a level of oversight in regards to how practitioners and owners were going about that.
Right. Okay, one last question that we've got time for, and this again goes back on the education theme. We've had a number of attendees who are students or cadets who are coming into the profession, and that's really fantastic. But one question that we've got here is our teachers keep telling us there are many cadet positions within private firms and council positions. However, I can't locate any jobs at the moment. I'm constantly checking SEEK, JORA and the AIBS Employment Board. what advice do you have for those students who are hearing about all of these opportunities but having trouble finding them?
Yeah, and I think that's concerning. I think that's part of our current review on how we can create those links between industry and students and the opportunities for those students. It sounds like they've tried the right places, the ABES employment boards and the relevant employment sites. I suspect the private building surveying companies that are looking for cadets would probably go straight to the institutions themselves. So it might be just a timing issue that when they're looking, they're not out there. I must admit, I haven't got good vision on how many positions are available within private industry, and that's part of the exercise of engaging with the privates around the opportunities to create a career pathway program so that there'll be more places for students and a more structured approach around stepping through the experience that they can then show as a record for their registration, but also that we can ensure that they're not sort of sitting in the back room filling out forms, that they are getting a broader experience opportunity in privates, local government, VBA, VMIA, DBRV. So those opportunities for those in future that can go across a number of those different agencies and sectors will be invaluable, because they'll have an understanding of how a building surveyor works in all those different sectors, hopefully be able to relate to the challenges in each of those areas, that it's not throwing mud over the fence. It's, well, yeah, there's reasons they're doing what they're doing, there's issues, there's roadblocks, and working together to actually solve those. So I'm hoping if we can give these students a broader experience, that will mean that we get that better collaboration across the industry.
And Bronwyn, can I just add, look, we're really passionate about moving into this space at scale, and would like as many people as we could from industry to partner with us. It's a conversation that I'm having with my government colleagues, across all different departments and agencies. So I'm, passionate that the collective, we can deliver better pathways. So, call out to anyone in industry who wants to work with us to be part of a program, put some investment into it. We all put some investment in, and we'll get these this new talent coming through far sooner, and a better experience for them.
Thank you, Sue. All right, well, that wraps up the conference. As I mentioned yesterday, we've had 24 speakers or participants in the conference, which is a mean effort over the 6.5 odd hours that we've run this conference. And thank you very much to every single one of those for the time and effort they've put in to participate. And thank you to the VBA and to Andrew and his team, who've been a pleasure to work with and have been spot on. We've had a couple of little hitches along the way, but I think ultimately I'm certainly very happy with how the conference has gone, and I hope you've found it a valuable experience and a good education for you, and certainly much more enlightened about what the VBA is doing and how you can collaborate with them to help continually improve the industry and your profession. So thank you again, and I'll look forward to seeing you soon. Bye-bye.